Well, folks, in almost every aspect of your life, one of the keys is being able to recognize the nuance of things. And in today's society, that unfortunately is not what sells, especially in the mainstream media. What sells is divisiveness and taking hard stances. But every now and then, you'll have that one person who comes along with a well thought out, logical, balanced approach that doesn't look like he came from an echo chamber, such as the case of Coleman Hughes. He is a 28-year-old graduate of Columbia University, and for his young age has had many impressive achievements, including contributions to the Wall Street Journal, speaking out against identity politics, as well as the New York Times, discussing his opposition to affirmative action as a gay African American. And he's even gone on to testify before Congress on the idea of reparations.
Thank you, Chairman Cohen, Ranking Member Johnson, and members of the committee. It's an honor to testify on a topic as important as this one. Nothing I'm about to say is meant to minimize the horror and brutality of slavery and Jim Crow. Racism is a bloody stain on this country's history, and I consider our failure to pay reparations directly to freed slaves after the Civil War to be one of the greatest injustices ever perpetrated by the U.S. government. But I worry that our desire to fix the past compromises our ability to fix the present. Think about what we're doing today. We're spending our time debating a bill that mentions slavery 25 times, but incarceration only once, in an era with no black slaves, but nearly 1 million black prisoners. A bill that doesn't mention homicide once, at a time when the Center for Disease Control reports homicide as the #1 cause of death for young black men. I'm not saying that acknowledging history doesn't matter. It does. I'm saying there's a difference between acknowledging history and allowing history to distract us from the problems we face today. We need safer neighborhoods and better schools. We need a less punitive criminal justice system. We need affordable health care. And none of these things can be achieved through reparations for slavery. If we were to pay reparations today, we would only divide the country further, making it harder to build the political coalitions required to solve the problems facing black people today. We would insult many black Americans by putting a price on the suffering of their ancestors. And we would turn the relationship between black Americans and white Americans from a coalition into a transaction. But paying reparations to all descendants of slaves is a mistake. Take me, for example. I was born 3 decades after the end of Jim Crow into a privileged household in the suburbs. I attend an Ivy League school. Yet I'm also descended from slaves who worked on Thomas Jefferson's Monticello plantation. So reparations for slavery would allocate federal resources to me, but not to an American with the wrong ancestry, even if that person is living paycheck to paycheck and working multiple jobs to support a family.
Now that clip was from 2019, and it just goes to show how truly nuanced and balanced he was in his approach. He is acknowledging the horrors of the past and not being dismissive of it. And also, he's arguing the idea that this hyper-focus on reparations would set race relations back. And despite how pragmatic he was in his approach, you could clearly see that in the back there were people that weren't taking him seriously. They're making faces at him. They're being dismissive of him. But despite the opposition he received from his own people, his accomplishments got him on Forbes 30 Under 30 at age 24, and this year he wrote a book, The End of Race Politics, Arguments for a Colorblind America, which he discussed on The View.
Arguments for a colorblind America. What do you mean when you say that?
So a lot of people equate colorblindness to I don't see race or to pretending not to see race. I think that's a big mistake. We all see race, right? And we're all capable of being racially biased, so we should all be self-aware to that possibility. My argument is not for that. My argument is that we should try our very best to treat people without regard to race, both in our personal lives and our public policy.
Of course.
And the reason I wrote this book, thank you. The reason I wrote this book is because in the past 10 years, it has become very popular to, in the name of anti-racism, teach a kind of philosophy to our children and in general that says your race is everything. Right? And I think that is the wrong way to fight racism, and that's why I wrote this book at this time.
Can I just point out that there is a reason for that. You know, when I went to school, getting any information about anyone's race was not taught. No history, there was no black history. None of those things were taught. And here in America, 100 years ago when I was a young woman, that's how people saw you. That's how they judged you. So I think, I don't want to say it's your youth, but I think you have a point, but I think you have to also take into consideration what people have lived through in order to understand why.
Okay, pause it right here because there is something to unpack here. I think if you've listened to everything that he's said so far, it's been nothing but consideration for people's life experiences. When he testified before Congress, him just saying that the failure to pay reparations to people who lived through slavery or Jim Crow was one of the greatest injustices. And that should be a testament to his consideration and his compassion. Now, I bring this up because, yes, The View did bring him on as an opposing viewpoint. But it begs the question for me, did they bring him on to actually listen, or did they bring him on just to check a box and virtue signal? Now, I don't know what's in their hearts and minds, but with the way that they've conducted themselves so far, I'm inclined to believe the latter. But proceed.
Has been such a pointing of very specific racial things, like women couldn't get into colleges. If you were a black person, there were a lot of colleges wouldn't accept you. Trying to equal the playing field. I think that's what a lot of folks have been trying to do. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I think that's your experience, and that's valid. You know, as a counterpoint, when I was in 5th grade, we all watched Roots together in public school.
Yeah.
So these are different experiences. I think it's also different generations. It's different parts of the country, right? We have very different cultures all living together in one country. So I'm not going to deny that. But I view this notion of a colorblind society similar to the idea of a peaceful society, which is to say it's an ideal, it's a North Star. And the point is not that we're ever going to get there, we're not going to touch it, but we have to know when we're going forward and when we're going backwards. And we're going backwards when we're doing woke kindergarten in San Francisco, you didn't hear about this story?
No, but
wait, because I want to get
to pause it again because I love the way that he responded to Whoopi Goldberg. That's the definition of class that you don't see very often these days. He started out by validating her experience, and that in and of itself could resolve a lot of problems and conflicts if we just do not be dismissive. And I also love how he pointed to a tangible example of something that's been counterproductive. Woke kindergarten, which I have talked about on this show, and I'll link to that episode. But for a very high-level recap in case you have missed it, a low-performing school in Cali sunk $250,000 into a program to improve test scores, and as the title would imply, focuses only on leftist ideologies. And instead of improving anything, it made things worse for the students. And heads up, guys, we're going to be pausing this quite a bit to really process what we're seeing in sizable chunks. But let's chug along.
You believe that public policies that address socioeconomic differences would be better at benefiting disadvantaged groups, and that race-based policies often hurt the very people they're trying to help. What are some examples of policies that would be better at reducing racial disparities?
So my overall argument is that class, socioeconomics, is a better proxy for disadvantage. We all want to help the disadvantaged, and the question is, how do we identify them, right? The default right now in a lot of areas of policy is to use Black and Hispanic identity as a proxy for disadvantage, and my argument is that you actually get a better picture of who needs help by looking at socioeconomics and income. That picks out people in a more accurate way.
Well, right? So, not my question, but when you say that socioeconomics picks out people in a better way than race, when you do look at the socioeconomics, you see the huge disparity between white households and black households. You see the huge disparity between white households and Hispanic households. So your argument, and I've read your book twice because I wanted to give it a chance, your argument that race has no place in that equation is really fundamentally flawed, in my opinion.
Well, there's two separate questions. One is whether each racial group is socioeconomically the same. That I agree with you. They're not.
They're not. And the stats show that.
But of course, I agree with that fully.
You know, as soon as somebody starts coming at you with a condescending manner, that should be all you need to know about where their head's at. And even in the points where he concedes that Sunny Hostin is correct on, she comes at him with a "that's what I thought" type attitude. And then on top of everything, she tries to use the fact that she supposedly knows MLK's daughter as some moral and intellectual high ground.
I have the high ground.
The question is, how do you address that in the way that actually targets poverty the best?
Great.
And what Martin Luther King wrote in his book, Why We Can't Wait, is he called it, we need a Bill of Rights for the disadvantaged. And he said, yes, we should address racial inequality. Yes, we should address the legacy of slavery. But the way to do that is on the basis of class. And that will disproportionately target blacks and Hispanics because they're disproportionately poor, but it will be doing so in a way that also helps the white poor, in a way that addresses poverty as the thing to be addressed.
But as you are a student of Dr. King, I'm not only a student of Dr. King, I know his daughter, Bernice. You claim that color blindness was the goal of the civil rights movement, based upon Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, content of character versus the color of skin. Bernice, Dr. King's daughter, points out that 4 years after giving that speech, actually, Dr. King also said this: a society that has done something special against the Negro for hundreds of years must now do something special for Negroes. He also said in 1968, it was about less than a week before he was assassinated, this country never stops to realize that they owe a people kept in slavery for 244 years. So rather than class, he did write about that earlier on. Right before his death, he made the argument for racial equality and racial reparations. And your argument for color blindness, I think, is something that the right has co-opted. And so many in the black community, if I'm being honest with you, because I want to be, believe that you are being used as a pawn by the right and that you're a charlatan of sorts.
He's not a Republican.
So how do you...
He's never voted for a Republican.
You've said that you're a conservative.
No.
No, you did. A podcast that you did 2 weeks ago.
I said I was a conservative.
Yes, you did. So, but my question to you is, how do you respond to those critics?
Okay, let's give it let him answer.
First thing I think it's very important. The quote that you just pointed out about doing something special for the Negro. That's from the book Why We Can't Wait that I just mentioned.
Yes.
A couple paragraphs later, he lays out exactly what that something special was, and it was the Bill of Rights for the Disadvantaged, a broad class-based policy.
But he also says you must include race.
No, he didn't. He says it's
Yes, he does.
Okay.
I don't think he could make it any more clear that he's not talking about discounting race in its entirety. All he's saying is that while we should acknowledge that African Americans and Hispanics, for example, are disproportionately affected by these disparities, making the focus more on race is doing more harm than good. Rather, we should focus more on the socioeconomic aspects of it all. That way, more people could be helped up. Which really tells me that Sunny Hostin really isn't listening at all. And when she tries to trap him and that fails, then she resorts to straight up lying. Because nowhere does he actually indicate that he's conservative in any way. And even if he is, why does any of that matter? Now, let's see if he can continue to clap back in a classy way.
Well, everyone should go read the book Why We Can't Wait. Let's not get sidetracked by that.
Yeah.
I don't think I've been co-opted by anyone. I've only voted twice, both for Democrats. Although I'm an independent, I would vote for a Republican, probably a non-Trump Republican if they were compelling. I don't think there's any evidence I've been co-opted by anyone, and I think that's an ad hominem tactic people use to not address really the important conversations we're having here. And I think it's better, and it would be better for everyone if we stuck to the topics rather than make it about me with no evidence that I've been co-opted.
I want to give you the opportunity to respond to the criticism.
I appreciate it. There's no evidence that I've been co-opted by anyone. I have an independent podcast. I work for CNN as an analyst. I write for the Free Press. I'm independent in all of these endeavors, and no one is paying me to say what I'm saying. I'm saying it because I feel it.
Yes. Alyssa, you have the question.
Coleman, thanks for being here. So in the past decade, it feels like racial tensions have gotten worse. Do you see it that way, and what do you attribute it to?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at all the data, it finds that race relations were getting better until about 2013. That year, you had a majority of Black, Hispanic, and white Americans saying race relations were good, and then you just see it nosedive. And 2013, people like to blame, Republicans like to blame Obama. Wasn't his fault. Democrats like to blame Trump. It was actually just technology. We all got social media and smartphones, and we had videos being promoted in the algorithm that were unrepresentative, and it created this impression that racism was on the rise when in fact it had been on the decline for decades.
And it
Do you
allowed
attribute
everybody.
that at all to foreign actors getting involved in technology?
Yes, Russia tries to meddle, absolutely, but I don't think we can blame foreign actors. This is a homegrown problem.
Okay.
See, by making it a point to not blame either Republicans or Democrats, he's quickly shutting down Sonny's accusation. And also, the point that he made about social media was spot on. The algorithm truly does flood your feed with these instances or stories that give you a strong emotional reaction to make it seem like they're happening more often than they truly are. And that's not to say that when it does happen, it's not serious. All I'm saying is that it leads to the inevitable echo chamber, where all you see are things that reaffirm your pre-existing beliefs. So when people like Coleman Hughes come around to challenge Sonny Hostin or Whoopi Goldberg, they are not able to handle it. And Joe Rogan had a field day with their stupidity when Coleman Hughes was on his show.
I mean, it is a rabies-infested hen house.
And at the same time, it seemed like the most interesting part was their audience seemed to be on my side.
Yes.
And that's their audience.
Yes. Well, their audience is not really their audience. Their audience is a group of people they bring in to watch television shows. But arguably, like the fans, the real fans of The View that are like, oh, these ladies are on point. Most of those people can't leave the house. Like they're probably immobile.
Right. Because their mom's taking their kids to school and that's,
It's a very strange show, but it's fun to watch. It's just fun to watch them.
It's good entertainment.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly.
Well, they're just, it's interesting because I think Sunny is very intelligent, but she's ideologically captured.
Right.
That's sort of. I think the other ones. There's a couple of the other ones. Don't have to name any names. Are just very dull-minded. But I think Sunny's not one of them. I think she's smart but captured.
Sure. I think she came into it with an agenda.
Of course. They do everything with an agenda.
Yeah. She came into it. It seems really wanting to paint me as someone that has been co-opted by the right wing.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much research she had done into me. She claimed to have read my book twice, which is almost certainly not true.
Yeah,
because she was totally missummarizing.
When did the book come out?
February.
The odds are very low.
Very low, right? Because
very low.
Think of how many guests they have on their show, how
many
much
things
time
you have
she
to do,
has.
Family obligations. What is it, about 250 pages?
Something like that, yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
But I mean, I might be wrong. I mean, do you have an audiobook available?
I do, yeah. I read it myself.
Maybe she did it at double speed.
Yeah.
Twice.
So I sounded like Ben Shapiro the whole time.
I think the problem with that show is that show has this very specific ideological bubble in which they operate in. And they always bring on a token conservative woman and they yell over her and silence her. And, they did that with Meghan McCain and they did that with what is that other blonde woman from Survivor? Do you remember her, Jamie? She was always yelling. I mean, it's just, it's a bizarre show.
So we had 8 minutes, and America's approach to race, pretty big topic, pretty important topic.
I think the way before you start, I think the way you described it is brilliant, and the way we should all look at it. Of course, you're going to see race. The idea of being colorblind is ridiculous, but treat everybody. They're just human beings.
Yeah,
everybody's just individuals.
That's right.
That's what we should all hope for.
That's right. Yeah, there's been this common phrase, "I don't see race." That's equated with colorblindness. And point of my book is I want to say, get rid of that. Of course we see race, certainly in America, in the West. The point is not to pretend you don't see it. It's to say, you're a white guy, I'm a black and Hispanic guy. We notice that. We're not going to pretend it's not there. But whenever it matters, I'm going to try to treat you like an individual based on your personal qualities. And we're going to ask the government to do the same. Get race out of public policy. If you want to help disadvantaged people, do that on the basis of class.
100%. And understand that when you see these incentives that are put into corporations, these are methods of control. And that's what's going on when you see things like DEI initiatives. You're not really making the world a better place.
Right.
And then there's some people who are good intentioned, but have a very narrow perspective and a very limited amount of information that they're operating under, that will try to pretend that these things are overall good, are net positive.
Right.
Now, that last point that Joe Rogan made was spot on. It boils down to thinking critically and considering the idea that these race-based initiatives may be doing more harm than good. And the only way that you'll be able to consider that is by engaging with the nuance. Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're new to this channel, hopefully I've earned a subscription. Here's some videos for you to watch in the meantime. Until next time, peace out.